Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We apologize for the slight delay. There were some technical difficulties. There are new Zoom and YouTube website addresses on the district website. They've also been pushed out by Twitter and I believe Facebook. Is that correct? My name is David A. Jones II. I'm an attorney with the firm of Stock and Leader, and our office serves as solicitor of the Northern Lebanon School District. This is the time and place fixed for the public hearing for the purpose of reviewing the proposed construction of a new Northern Lebanon elementary school to house grades K through 6, located at the east intersection of School Drive and Airport Road, Fredericksburg, Bethel Township, Lebanon County. I'm joined this evening by Michelle Bucks, Board President, other members of the Northern Lebanon Board of School Directors, Dr. Gary Messinger, Superintendent, Scott Cousin of Crabtree Rohrball Associates, the project architect, Mr. Brad Remig, and Mr. Brad Remig of the Public Financial Management, the school district's financial advisor. With respect to the nature of this hearing, the Public School Code requires a hearing when a school board is contemplating a project of this nature. The purpose of the hearing is to provide information to the public with respect to the reasons for the project, the need for the project, the potential cost of the project, and essentially all aspects, including architectural and financing for the project. This is known as an Act 34 hearing. It has to do with legislation that was passed and is now found in Section 701.1 of the Pennsylvania Public School Code, 24 PS 7-701.1, and 22 PA Code 349.12. The hearing is required to be advertised. That advertising requirement has been met. On January 12th, 2021, at a publicly advertised meeting of the Board of School Directors, the board approved the Act 34 resolution, which authorized a maximum project cost and maximum building construction cost. On January 14th, 2021, the notice of this public hearing was posted on the school district website and has remained posted there since that time. In addition, on January 14th, 2021, the approved Act 34 project description packet was made available in the district administration offices for public review and has remained there since that time. Further, on January 14th, 2021, the approved Act 34 resolution and project description packet was posted on the district website for public review and has remained on the website since that time. The project description has now been available to the public for 20 days as required by law. The hearing notice invited public comment at this hearing and also specified procedures for submitting public comment in written form prior to this meeting. This hearing was also advertised on January 13th, 2021 in the Lebanon Daily News as set forth in the affidavit of publication issued by the same. All requirements with respect to this hearing have been met. I therefore declare this Act 34 hearing at the Northern Lebanon School District to be duly constituted. This is a formal hearing in the sense that we have a stenographer who is making a complete record of the proceedings. We will have a transcript developed from this hearing. The public may also participate in the hearing via the Zoom meeting platform at the URL address listed on the district website with the passcode Viking. In addition, this hearing is being live streamed for viewing purposes only through YouTube at the address as listed on the district website as well. When you speak, please speak loudly and slowly and have one person speak at a time so we have a clear transcript for our hearing. At this time, I will turn this over to Michelle Bucks, the board president, for a brief introduction with regard to the project.
Good evening. On behalf of the school board, I welcome you and thank you for joining us this evening. About a year ago, we as the school board started discussions regarding long-term plans for our buildings. It was clear that significant renovations to our elementary buildings or a new elementary building were necessary. Since then, we've had many discussions and presentations at public board meetings regarding this topic. Much thought, discussion, questions, collaboration, and energy have gone into the process to determine how to move forward in a way that will best serve our students and our Northern Lebanon community. Tonight, we bring together the professional groups that have been working as a team on these proposed plans. We will present the progress made. We will explain the rationale for the proposed building, as well as the costs and budget impacts. At the end of the presentation, there will be a time for public comments and questions. Tonight's agenda begins with a presentation by Scott Cousins from the architectural firm Crabtree, Rohrbaugh and Associates. Welcome, Scott.
Thank you, Ms. Bucks. I'm going to give a quick introduction on the format of tonight's presentation. If we can go to the next slide. This is the presentation that you see on the screen in front of you, and those who are participating online follows the Act 34 booklet, which is hard copies are available at the rear of the room here, and digital copies are available on the district website. So what you see here is the cover page. If we can go to the next slide. The table of contents, what you'll see before you, kind of outlines the format that we'll be following. And at the bottom right of the screen there, you'll see a reference to the page number of the booklet. If you go to the next slide. Just a brief agenda for this evening. You've already heard the call to order by Mr. Jones, and a brief introduction by Ms. Bucks. We'll go through, Dr. Messinger will talk about the project need. I will come back and talk about the overall project description and some of the costs. And then Mr. Remig will come and talk about the financial analysis. And then we'll conclude the meeting with the public comment session, which Mr. Jones will facilitate. The next slide is just the introduction that Mr. Jones already went through. And then I'll turn it over to Dr. Messinger, who's going to talk about the project need.
Welcome, everyone. I think the next 3 pages actually talk about the project need, and I do not want to stand here and read it to you. But as Dr. Bucks talked about, it was about a year ago, even a little bit longer than that for me. In my first meeting with the board, there was a discussion about the need for some of our buildings to be addressed from a maintenance standpoint. We also have some very low numbers at some of our elementary schools, which creates an inequity situation between the buildings. And there was a desire at that point to start to put together a plan to address those needs. As we looked at the needs, the things that we needed to take care of from a maintenance standpoint, such as HVAC systems, such as the security of our lobbies, such as some structural damage that needs to be replaced. The cost of those maintenance items, those improvements, started to escalate as we considered those costs. It was at that point where we decided that we should investigate the land that we had purchased over here years ago to look at the possibility of a new building. As we pursued that and Crabtree did their feasibility study, we reached a conclusion at that point that there would be a considerable operational savings by building a new elementary school. In a conservative estimate of operational savings would be about in the $1.4 to $1.5 million range. In addition to that, district enrollment is projected to decline. If that decline in enrollment continues, a projected savings of actually over $2 million came out of that feasibility study by consolidating into a new elementary school. At that point, it was decided to proceed with potential for design and getting costs, as to which we've already done. And we're at a point now we're going to hear about that design, and we're going to talk about those costs and the impact on the district. I would also like to mention that Mr. Remming and Mrs. Martin will be doing a presentation at the board meeting on Tuesday, talking about finances as well, in a little more detail if you're interested in zooming in for that session as well.
If you want to advance, I think it's 3 or 4 slides to it's page 6 on the bottom right. So a lot of what you'll see before you is requirements of the Act 34 of the information that we're required to disclose as part of this process. So the first slide here is a summary of owned buildings and land. What you'll see on the left-hand column there is basically a listing of all the current buildings within the district. East Hanover Elementary, Fredericksburg Elementary, Jonestown Elementary, Lickdale Elementary, along with a vacant piece of land adjacent to the high school property. The combined middle high school and the district administrative offices. So that's the existing current conditions on the left. On the right is the proposed plan project. So you'll see that the 4 existing elementary schools are closed, and we have 1 new K through 6 building on the adjacent property. Along with constructing that new elementary school, of course, 6th grade moves over there. So that frees up space at the middle high school, which becomes a 7-12 center. And then the district administrative offices is also looking at being constructed with that elementary school. Next slide. So as was mentioned before, we conducted a feasibility study last year. And in that study, we did investigate multiple options. Options 1A and 1B were similar options, similar to the project that's before you, which is a new elementary school. The difference between option 1A and 1B is 1A looked at a K through 5 school versus 1B looked at a K through 6 school. So very similar, but option 1A looked at not only the elementary school needs, but across the entire district, and looking at additions and renovations to the middle school and high school, which looked at a total project cost of all combined facilities of $80 to $87 million. Option 1B, where you move the 6th grade into the new elementary school, was slightly higher at $81 to $87.7 million. And then we also looked at another option 2, which was a partial consolidation of the elementary schools. So this looked at combining East Hanover, Frederick, and Lickdale, closing those schools and creating a new 3 to 6 grade elementary building on the adjacent vacant land, and then converting Jonestown Elementary through comprehensive renovations and additions into a K-2 center for the district-wide building. The cost of that option was roughly $78 to $87 million. Option 3 we looked at was basically keeping all your buildings in their current configuration, but as Dr. Messinger mentioned, addressing all the needs at all those existing buildings from existing facility standpoint, but also meeting the special educational needs and the program needs of the district. That scenario looked at costs of $77 to $85 million. You go to the next slide. So as mentioned, option 1B was selected by the board. You heard some of the various reasons. At the top of those lists, of course, is the savings over time from an operational standpoint, but it also maximized the facility and energy savings point of things, having to only maintain 1 building versus 4 elementary schools. It addressed issues with equity in class size and other amenities amongst your other elementary schools. So 1 building would house all the same amenities for all the elementary kids throughout the district. It also realigned 6th grade to be more properly served with the elementary grade grouping, and gets the 6th grade out of the middle high school, where the curriculum isn't as structured is structured differently than it would be should be for a sixth grade grade grouping. And of course, this option, along with some of the other options, utilize existing land that was owned by the district. Next slide. Talk a little bit about the description of the project. This is approximately 183,000 square foot elementary school for grades K through 6. It does have a Head Start or pre-K program associated with that. When you look at a capacity from a Department of Education standpoint, Pennsylvania Department of Education, it's around 1,275 students. That also includes, once again, the district administrative offices. Each grade grouping will hold 7 classrooms per grade, with the exception of kindergarten, which will hold 8 classrooms per grade. And we've also incorporated some flexible classrooms that, should the district experience the declining enrollment not come to fruition, or there might be increased enrollment, there's the capacity to handle that with the additional classrooms and ability to shuffle within the building. So some of the program spaces include the general classrooms I mentioned, collaboration space, special education classrooms, art, music, STEM classrooms, band and music classrooms, small group instruction spaces, a media center, a gymnasium, cafeteria, stage, school administrative offices, and other various support spaces. The site, which is the site across School Drive from the existing high school, is approximately 49.8 acres. It's currently used as agriculture. It does have public utilities of electric, gas, water, and sewer. The design you'll see in a moment has a proposed parking spaces of 284. It has hard surface and grass surface play areas for the students. It has a separate bus and parent drop-off to separate for safety concerns. Has multi-purpose fields and 2 baseball fields and a separate loading area and receiving area. The building will be designed with energy efficient mechanical, electrical, and plumbing systems, LED lighting throughout. It will be protected with a automatic sprinkler system and fire alarm system, and it will include the full accoutrement of today's technology of wireless access throughout, fiber optics, and voice over IP. We will be following the current building codes as prescribed by the Pennsylvania state offices of the PAUCC. And we can go to the next slide. We'll look into a little bit more detail. So you see the site plan before you, working our way from the bottom left of the drawing here. That is the entrance that aligns with the current entrance of the middle school, high school off of School Drive. That entrance is the bus entrance, and you'll see there on the bottom left-hand side is the bus drop-off area that I mentioned before, was separated to the right from the parent drop-off area. Parents dropping off and picking up would access the site via Airport Road to the north, or the top half of the sheet, and they would traverse along that access drive to the front of the building, where there'd be a parent drop-off, visitor parking, and also staff parking. The red arrow in the middle of the page, in the middle of the sheet there, in front of the white building, that is the main entrance. Off to the right, you'll see the play areas for daily use for the students. Also, further off to the right, on the other side of the access drive, you'll see those couple multi-purpose fields and the 2 baseball fields. Those will be used not only for phys ed, but may be made available for the public for after-hours use. To the rear of the building, you'll see a service drive to the upper side of that sheet. That is where the loading dock is. If you go to the next slide. This gives you an overview of the first floor of the building. To orient yourself, you'll see at the bottom of the page, the red arrow that illustrates that front entrance once again. The pink area to the right of that front entrance is the main administrative guidance and nurse suite. So the entrance is along that yellow bar that goes top to bottom on the sheet. That yellow bar is what we call the commons. It's the main circulation spine that organizes the building. To the left, you have the classroom wings of grades 1 through 6. These are 2-story classroom wings. So in the very first classroom wing is first and second grade. The middle classroom wing is third and fourth. And then the classroom wing at the top of the sheet is fifth and sixth. Off to the right, on the lower half of the sheet, you'll see the kindergarten wing there, and then the district administrative office is at the end of that corridor. Also, you can see located about that central spine or that central commons are the various other support special classes that students will be attending, such as the art and music. Also, the cafeteria and the gymnasium are also off that main spine. This will allow for easy access to this for public use after hours. We'll have the ability to close off the classroom wings so that they're not accessed by the public after hours, but the gymnasium and cafeteria are. And then at the rear of the building is the kitchen and the mechanical space and the loading dock. If we go to the next slide. This is the second floor. As I mentioned before, off to the left are your three-story classroom wing or two-story classroom wings. And then off to the right above the main administrative guidance and nurse suite is the media center. And above the art are the STEM classrooms. So that gives you an overview of the site plan and the floor plan. Next, I'll go into a breakout of the cost for the project. If you go to the next slide. So you'll see before you forms that are called PlanCon. PlanCon is a process through the Department of Education for reimbursement of the state through the state. It should be noted that currently there is a moratorium on any reimbursement from the state. So that it's not anticipated that this project will receive state funding. However, the Act 34 process likes to see things broken out the similar ways that are done in this PlanCon process. So we use their forms to convey the cost. So what you see before you is Form DO2 at the top of the sheet. Highlighted is in Section A is the structure cost. As required by Pennsylvania state law, this will be a multi-prime bid contract, meaning we'll have separate prime contractors bid the project. We're anticipating right now bidding to separate primes for general construction, HVAC, plumbing, and electrical construction. And the cost to the right are the estimated costs for each of those trades. So just above item 8 at the bottom, you'll see a subtotal. That is what we could expect to receive on bid day. That is our estimated cost for what the bids might come in when we bid the project out. Just over $38.8 million. Working our way down the sheet, you'll see some other columns, builder's risk insurance, and then you'll see a subtotal at the bottom that gets you to a subtotal cost of $38.9 million. Next slide, please. Also tracking the cost are the architect's fee that includes all the engineers, structural, electrical, mechanical, plumbing engineers, interior design fees and architectural fees at $2.3 million. Moving down the line C, the movable fixtures and equipment. These are all the items in the building that aren't fixed in place and that the district will purchase separately from the actual construction project. Those costs are estimated at $1.7 million. Moving down to line item E, site costs. These are costs that are attributed to the building. What the Department of Education, when we get to the maximum building construction cost, that excludes site costs. There are some of those site costs that are included in that maximum building construction cost. These are those. So sanitary sewage disposal fees, architect's fee on those on the sanitary design. And so you can get a total site cost of $310,000, which is inclusive of the Act 34 maximum building project costs. If you go to the next slide. So further breaking out additional project costs, you have construction manager fee, and that is the district is engaged Fidavia in that process to oversee construction and provide oversight of the design phase. Architectural printing, which is a reimbursable cost listed there in line item number 4. Test borings. These are borings that we are required to obtain the density of the soil so our engineers can design the proper footings, and also infiltration of the site so we can design the stormwater. Survey of the site done by our civil engineer, and then contingency to handle any unforeseen conditions that might arise during construction or throughout the project as changes occur. Above that contingency line item, you'll see a Plan Con D additional cost of $2.1 million. A summary of those additional costs are at the bottom of the slide here, the DO3 additional project costs. And they include testing and inspections that are required during construction to make sure that the actual construction meets the requirements of code and other aspects of the design. Regulatory agency fees, these will be township review fees, other agencies like County Conservation District, building permit fees, things like that. Commissioning, that includes testing of building systems to make sure they're functioning properly as designed. This is required by code. Water tap fees, we will be adding water capacity for this building. Civil engineering design fees, you'll see there that are separate from the other fees, and then food service consulting and codes consulting. So those, once again, total additional project costs of $2.1 million. Next slide, please. And then finally, obviously, for a project of this nature, you're going to look at financing the majority of your money, and there's costs associated with those financing fees. So you can see line items 1 through 9 encapsulate the different aspects that are incurred and costs that are incurred with financing the project. The total of those financing fees is $748,000. And then when you add that to the cost for everything else that we've reviewed, you'll see on the bottom right-hand side of the sheet, you get a total project cost of $47.97 million. And once again, this is the total project cost, not the Act 34 maximum building project cost. Go to the next slide. As I mentioned before, one more slide. 16, you're good. As I mentioned before, when we're calculating the total project maximum building construction cost, site costs are excluded from that. So the estimated cost of the site work is $2.5 million. There's a portion of builder's risk associated with that and design fees associated with that. So you'll get the total excludable cost on the sheet. And then if we go to the next slide, kind of the heart of the Act 34 hearing is the maximum building construction cost. So you see there that the total cost of for the maximum building construction is about halfway down line C on that sheet, and that cost is $40,356,973. And once again, this was the maximum building construction cost that the board did take action on as a resolution at their last board meeting, and which is required to be done prior to holding a hearing. I will note at the bottom of the page, if that cost is exceeded by more than 8%, or the line or the number you see at the bottom there, a second Act 34 hearing will be required. So that summarizes the cost of the project. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Remig, and he's going to talk about the financing scenarios the district is investigating.
Thank you, Scott. Again, my name's Brad Remig. I'm with Public Financial Management, the district's financial advisor. And pages 18 through 23, for those of you that have the booklet, is going to be the section that I'm going to cover. Obviously, as the financial advisor, when you're undertaking a project of this magnitude, financing comes into play, as was mentioned earlier. So one of the things that we are challenged to do is to figure out the most efficient way to finance the project, because obviously the reserves or cash was not going to be feasible to do that. So when we go to the next slide, page number 19, there are a couple different ways to finance a project for a school district. One is through a general obligation bond, and what that basically means is the school district issues a bond directly to different investors. And that's one option to pursue. The other is to look at a local authority local authorities you could partner with to issue the bonds on behalf of the district, or SPSBA, that means the State Public School Building Authority, is another option for what you could go, the district could consider for the issuance of bonds to pursue, to get the funds for the project. We did an analysis, made some assumptions, and obviously as the advisor and as the district, we want the lowest payment we can possibly have, and the lowest costs. And this table basically demonstrates our illustration that to get the lowest cost, the lowest amount of bonds needed, the lowest payment, the general obligation bond route is going to be the route that's going to be the most efficient for the school district. So that's the route that we plan to pursue should the project move forward. Going to the next page, there are some other things, there's some other strategies, some other tools in our toolbox that we're going to potentially utilize when the bonds are sold. Number one talks about the possibility of applying for bond insurance. And what that means is the credit score or credit rating on the bonds being issued could be higher, could be better than if we just did it on our own. So we're going to pursue that, because if we go ahead and get this insurance, our payments might even be lower. So that's something that we're obviously interested in pursuing. And that's a strategy that we'll potentially entertain when bonds are issued, because no bonds have been issued for the project as of yet. The other we mentioned there on line 2 is the utilization of what we call a wraparound bond structure. And what that means is right now the school district has some bonds that they're currently paying off. And what we don't want to do is be paying on those bonds and have a big payment come on this new one that's higher than it has to be. Okay, so the wraparound basically gets us to a situation where we pay some of the smaller payments up front until those other bonds are paid off. And then those dollars that are in the budget to pay off the other bonds can then be used to pay for these. Okay, it's what's called the wraparound structure. So that will help keep the impact to the budget down. For the discussion, as you'll notice on some of the subsequent pages, I think it's 22 and 23 of the booklet, there are a couple different samples of a debt service schedule or a payment schedule that you might see for a bond of what we're looking at. They're only estimates at this point in time. Right now, we're anticipating funding about 20 million of the project here in 2021, and then the balance of it in 2022. We want to make sure that we stagger the payments. We don't want to borrow the money all at once because we don't want to overburden the budget. And we want to make sure that when we get to the second piece and the project's undergoing, we have a good idea of how much money we need to borrow. So a two-step process is quite common for a project like this. And that's what we're anticipating we would do for the district to finance the project. But I do want to make sure that this is the plan, and we have not, these are only estimates. We haven't obviously issued any bonds, nor has the district issued any bonds just quite yet. So I don't know if the slide just before it, maybe we could go back. There we go. I did want to touch upon that very statement at the bottom, is because of the PlanCon moratorium, we have not made any assumption that we get any PlanCon reimbursement from the state during this process. So we've assumed that there's no dollars coming in that form. The news that was mentioned earlier was that while our debt payment obviously is going to go up, if we're going to borrow $47 million, the payment in the budget is going to go up. But what's going to happen correspondingly, as was mentioned earlier, is there are going to be some other budgetary or operational savings that are going to be experienced by undertaking the project. And right now, what we're seeing is that these are some estimates on here as to what we think there might be in terms of operational savings. Leanne and I worked on this together, and those are listed. About $1.8 million is what's anticipated. One of the things that we need to do for the purpose of the hearing as well is put this in what we call millage equivalents. Some people are familiar with millage and things of that nature. So when we looked at the indirect cost savings, and we assume on that page, we mentioned that a collected mill brings in about $1,385,000. This budgetary savings in terms of mills would be about 1.35, that's just listed on that page. Of reduce due to the savings. And these would be experienced over time. So getting to my very final page, if you were to look at what the direct cost is for the debt, I mentioned there was two bonds that are being considered, the 20 million in 2021 and the 26,975 in 2022. The direct costs, or the millage equivalent of the increase in the debt payment, is about 1.31. So if you think about it now, if the debt goes up 1.31 in terms of mills, but we have operational savings of 1.35, the thought is that basically more or less the savings are going to cover the cost of the new bond and the debt service, which was, I think, alluded to earlier. I know there's next couple pages actually show you what in the booklet, what a debt service schedule looks like. A lot of numbers, a lot of payments over time, but I basically covered the summary of those in my discussion earlier with the financing analysis. But these are the things that I produce every day and probably only I care about. But anyway, the point is they are attached just for the public's reference if you wanted to see what a debt repayment schedule might look like for a bond issue of this nature. So with that, I was going to turn it back over to Mr. Jones.
Now that we have all the basic information out there about the project from a construction, a need standpoint, and the financing standpoint, it's time for the public comment period. We've not had any pre-registered speakers for this evening. So at this point, we'll open the floor for public comments by those in the audience, both whether they're in person or on Zoom. Kurt, were you going to put up the process? So there's going to be a process put up on the Zoom website, and it's the process by which you may be recognized and asked to speak. We're going to start with those in the room. A couple of ground rules. Please wait until you are recognized. Identify your name and your address for the record. Whether you ask a question or make a comment or express an opinion about the project, try to speak clearly and deliberately so that the stenographer will be able to take all of your information down and so that we will have a clean record of what transpired here this evening. We're asking each speaker to limit his or her comment to 5 minutes so that everyone who wants an opportunity to speak will have an opportunity to do so. Anyone who speaks for as long as 4 minutes will get a gentle reminder from myself at the 4-minute mark that there is only 1 minute remaining. And that is so you can, in the last minute, focus any particular comments that you have on things that you've not brought up at that point in time. Further, if you have a question this evening, it can be answered relatively quickly. We'll attempt to answer your question tonight. If the question requires additional research or additional time to answer, the question and answer will be posted on the FAQ section of the building update section on the district website, so you can access that. So with that, I'd like to start with anyone in the room. So if anyone would like to come forward and make a comment, please come forward to the lectern and identify yourself for the record and ask your question or post your comment. Anyone in the room? Okay. Come on forward, sir. They need to hear you. Everyone needs to hear you. So yeah, it's not that far. Okay. Do you have I'll tell you what, why don't you go ahead and make your comment and I'll repeat it. How about that? Up. I'm sorry, can you please identify yourself first for the record and your address? Did you get that? Okay, sir. Well, I'll take the second part first. PlanCon's been in moratorium for, I believe, 6 years. 6 years. We've been waiting for that to come back for 6 years, and there is no end in sight to that moratorium as far as we can tell. So to that respect, the need is here for the project. The desire of the legislature to end that moratorium is not there. So we don't expect that So that's probably off the table, but that's certainly a board consideration. As for the test borings, they have been completed. Is that correct, Scott? Scott is shaking his head. Yes, that has been completed. The stormwater design will be done as a part of the site design in the land development process. So if you had any questions about that, that design will be presented to the township, and that would be a part of their approval process moving forward. Any other questions, sir? Oh, I'm sorry. November, December timeframe, but we'll certainly put that question on the FAQ. We'll get an exact answer for you and put that on the FAQ and on the website. Okay. Anyone else in the auditorium? All right. With that, I'm going to turn to Kurt. Andrew, if you could please unmute and make your, please identify yourself and your address for the record, and then please ask your question or make your comment.
Andrew Murphy, 1828 Blacksbridge Road. How far are we down the process? How much money's been spent to date towards on this? And is it too late to turn back and switch options, or are we already fully committed?
Well, I don't know that we can answer exactly how much we're into the process dollar wise, but we are, the school district is fairly far down the road on the design process and the financing process. Certainly that's a question that you could direct to the board and ask them at a board meeting. But at this point, the board is fully committed to moving forward, having passed the maximum building cost resolution at the January 12th meeting.
And you had said that the moratorium on the Plan Con has been for years now at this point. So there's no advantage in waiting at all for any additional funding to come down the pike.
What I can tell you is there is no end to the moratorium in sight. It has not been discussed. And I think the governor has asked for approximately an additional 2.1 billion in the budget, but that would come with a price tag of, I think it was 1.5% in state income tax. We'll have to wait to see if that comes down the pike, but I think that's slated for education, not for project reimbursement processes. So I certainly understand everyone's concern about possible moratoriums being lifted. Unfortunately, school districts for the last 6 years have been waiting for that with bated breath. And again, there is no end in sight.
And so these figures are only for the elementary school, not for any of the other buildings that they are looking at, or the sports fields and all?
That is correct. This is solely based on the project that was proposed this evening. To the extent that would include the district administration offices, that's obviously included in this project cost. But this does not include any other buildings or any other sports complex, field, facility, as the case may be.
When they do the field house and the sports complex, will that require another Act 34 hearing?
It would not require an Act 34 hearing, but it would certainly be discussed at public board meetings as to how it would be financed and how much it would cost.
Okay. Is there any breakdown for the painting and drywall costs?
The painting and drywall, not at this point. That would be included in the general construction package overall. However, I don't think the architect has broken that down to that extent at this point in time in the design.
Would those figures have been included in the numbers you gave tonight?
Oh, yes. There would be a round number thrown in there. It's just it's not broken down to that itemization to this point in time.
Okay.
Mr. Murphy, are you done?
Yes, I think so.
Okay, thank you. Kurt, do we have Mr. Kreiser, could you please identify yourself for the record and provide your address, and please proceed with your comment.
Sure. Kevin Kreiser, 10118 Jonestown Road. Yeah, my question's really about personnel. I read on the website that there's going to be a reduction in personnel, which is that's like the more significant part of the savings. I'm wondering what that's going to mean in terms of educational quality. The thing that I'm worried about most is I have 5 kids and they're all going to be in elementary school. So I'm just wondering if there's less teachers, then there's going to be bigger class sizes, or do I have that wrong somehow?
We're going to ask Superintendent Dr. Messinger to come forward and address that question.
Yeah, that's a great question. And that staffing is all across the board. Just to give an example, for instance, we have 4 buildings, we have 4 secretaries. We would not need 4 secretaries. And that we've made it very clear that we don't want to furlough anyone, and we're going to look for spots with attrition. We have some people thinking about retirement over the next few years. And we always have the options of moving people from one position to another. However, you can use that across the board in terms of staffing. As far as teachers go, we have buildings right now with class sizes of 10. And while I understand as a father of kids that have gone through the district, if you're in a class size of 10, that's really fabulous. But it's an inefficient way to run a school district. And studies would tell you that 10 versus a 15 is not necessarily a huge difference. So yes, I think there are instances where class sizes go up, but there are also class sizes that we have 30, 31, or have in the past. Obviously this year with COVID, we've added a few teachers to keep that lower. Those class sizes will come down. So on average, I would say the class sizes wind up being the same. Some will come down, some will go up. But we have class sizes that we'd like to shoot for, smaller at the primary grades, larger at the intermediate grades a little bit. But those class sizes are relatively standard in terms of what you would see in most elementary schools. In the 20 to 26 range is what we shoot for. Sometimes there's a little less, sometimes there's a little more, but it won't significantly impact class sizes as a whole.
Yeah, I guess just coming from someone who purposely chose East Hanover to get the smaller class size, it's a little bit of a, people who plan their life around something kind of got gypped a little bit, I'd say. I guess would be my other. And the other thing is about busing. What about the quality of life for students who now they already have long rides. Now they're going to be going quite a bit further. People in Greenpoint, people out here in Grantville.
If I heard correctly, and it was hard for me to get it clear. You're talking about busing and times on the bus. We have kids on the bus for an hour at times at this point. We certainly don't anticipate that to be any longer. We have not worked out bus routes. It's something that we'll do over time. So I can't answer that exactly. Yeah, and I'm not even going to take a guess as to whether or not we can improve the efficiency of our buses at this point. But I don't think they would get any longer than some of the kids that we currently have on buses for a long period of time.
Mr. Kreiser, thank you for your comments, and they have been taken down for the record. Do we have any more comments in the Zoom? All right, I'm going to come back to the room just in case anyone decided they'd like to speak this evening. Okay. With that being said, there is a time for comment following the public hearing this evening. There was an advertisement that was placed on the district website and also in the paper. And I'm going to try to read this, but it's very, very small, and my eyes are very, very tired at my age. But it provides that written comments regarding the project may also be submitted up to 30 days after the public hearing by mailing comments to Pat Martin, the board secretary, at 345 School Drive, Fredericksburg, Pennsylvania, 17026, or emailed to pmartin@norleb.k12.pa.us. Comments submitted after the public hearing must be submitted no later than March 5th, 2021. We thank you for participating this evening and being here. And at this time, we will adjourn the Act 34 hearing for the elementary school. Thank you.